It's a huge honor for me to be here and to have an opportunity to address to this distinguished audience. But before I will start my speech, I want to tell you that today people in Ukraine commemorate the 85th anniversary of victims of Holodomor, or death by hunger. The man-made famine which was imposed against Ukraine and its people by Communist Party, which resulted in deliberate death of starvation of millions and millions Ukrainian men, women, and children. Please share with me this moment of silence to commemorate these innocent lives. Thank you. I am a human rights lawyer, and I have been applying the law to defend people and human dignity for many years. I have often heard that freedom and human rights are important, but economic benefits, geopolitical interests, or security concerns are even more significant. The fault of this approach is that freedom and peace are inextricably linked, and states that grossly violate human rights pose threats not just to their own citizens, but to the peace and security in general. The clear example is Russia, which destroys its own civil society step by step. But for the long time, the world turned a blind eye to this. Unpunished evil grows. Russian troops committed crimes in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world. They have never been punished. They start to believe they can do whatever they want. And now, as a human rights lawyer, I found myself in a situation when the law doesn't work. Russian troops are destroying residential buildings, schools, churches, museums, and hospitals. They're attacking evacuation corridors. They're torturing people in filtration camps. They forcibly taking Ukrainian children to Russia. They ban Ukrainian language and culture. They are abducting, robbing, raping, and killing civilians in the occupied territories. And the entire UN system of peace and security can't stop this. Let me share with you the story of 10-year-old boy Ilya Matviichuk from Mariupol. When Russian troops tried to siege the city, they didn't allow the International Committee of Red Cross to open the green corridors and to evacuate civilians. Hence, Ilya and his mother, like other people in Mariupol, have to hide in the basement of their residential buildings from Russian shelling. They melted snow to have water, and they made fires to cook at least some food. But when supplies ran out, they were forced to go out, and suddenly they appeared in the center of Russian shelling. Ilya's mother was injured in her head, and the boy's legs was torn. With the last strength, his mother took her son to the front apartment. It was no medical assistance, because prior to this, Russians deliberately destroyed the maternity hospital and entire medical infrastructure in Mariupol. So in this front apartment, they just lie down on the couch and hugged each other. They were lying like this for several hours. And this 10-year-old boy Ilya told to my colleague that his mother died and got frozen right in his arms. I have a question. How we people who live in 21st century will defend human beings, their lives, their freedom, and their human dignity? Can we rely on the law, or does just brutal force matter? The answer to this question is important not just for people in Ukraine, Iran, Syria, Nicaragua, or Sudan. The answer to this question will define our common future. First, there is no peace without justice. War turned peoples into the numbers because the scale of our crimes grows so fast that it becomes impossible to recognize all the stories. And that is why it's important to tell them. Let me share with you the story of 62-year-old civilian Oleksandr Shelipov. He was killed by a Russian soldier near his house. This tragedy received a huge media coverage only because it was a first court trial after the large-scale war. His wife, Katerina, on the court, told to the judges that her husband was an ordinary farmer, but he was her whole universe, and now she lost everything. People are not numbers. We must ensure justice for all victims, regardless who they are, their social position, the types of crime they endured, and whether or not media or international organizations are interested in their case. We must return people their names, because life of each person matters. Second, occupation is just another form of the war. I work with people who went through hell, so let me assure you that people in Ukraine dream about peace. But peace doesn't come when country which was invaded stop fighting. That's not peace. That's occupation. And occupation is the same war, but just in another form. Occupation is not just about changing one state flag to another. Occupation means enforced disappearances, torture, rapes, denial of your identity, forcible adoption of your own children, filtration camps, and mass graves. This is a story of children's writer Volodymyr Vakulenko. He wrote a beautiful story for Ukrainian children. An entire generation of Ukrainian children brought up on his daddy's book. During Russian occupation, he disappeared. His family hoped to the last that he's alive, but like thousands of other Ukrainian civilians are in Russian captivity. But when Ukrainian army liberated his region, we found mass graves in the forest. And in unmarked grave with the number 319, we found the body of Volodymyr Vakulenko. I know his family. It's very difficult for them to accept the result of identification. There is no legitimate reason in doing such things. There is also no military necessity in it. Russian troops did this horrible thing only because they could. Third, we need to reform the international system of peace and security. I don't know how historians in future will call this historical period, but the world order, which is based on UN Charter and international law, is collapsing before our eyes. The UN system, created after the Second World War, established unjustified indulgences for individual countries. And now it leads to a situation when the work of Security Council is paralyzed. It's very easy to predict that in such situation, fires like wars will emerge more and more often in different parts of the globe because the international wiring is faulty and sparks are everywhere. I know that people in South Africa think that this war started in February 2022. But let me tell you that this war started in February 2014. 10 years ago. This was just after the Revolution of Dignity, when millions of people in Ukraine had bravely stood up against corrupt authoritarian regime. They took to the streets across the country. They peacefully demonstrated just for a chance to build the country where rights of everyone are protected. Government is accountable, judiciary is independent, and police do not beat students who are peacefully demonstrating. And when the authoritarian regime fell, Ukraine got its chance for democratic transition. And in order to stop us on this way, Russia invaded. Russia occupied Crimea and part of eastern region in 2014, and then in 2022 expanded this war to the large-scale invasion. Because Putin, as every dictator in the world, afraid of the ideas of freedom which came closer to Russian borders. And that is why this is not just a war between two states. This is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. And with this war, Putin attempts to convince the entire world that democracy, freedom, human rights are fake values because they couldn't protect anyone during the war. He attempts to convince that country with a strong military potential and nuclear weapon can break the world order, can dictate its rules to entire international community, and even forcibly changed internationally recognized borders. And if Putin succeeds, it will encourage other authoritarian leaders in different parts of the globe to do the same. Governments will be forced to invest money not in education, healthcare, culture, or business development, not in solving global problems like climate change or social inequality, but in weapons. We'll witness an increase in the number of nuclear states, the emergence of robotic armies, the using AI as the methods of war, and new weapons of mass destruction. If this scenario comes true, we will find ourselves in a world which will be dangerous for everyone, without any exception. Fourth, we are losing freedom in the world. Half of the population in the world this year goes to election. But don't be in illusion. More than 80% of people around the globe live in non-free or partially free societies. This means that people who have the right to vote for whom they want to vote, who have the right to say what they want to say, who have the right to love whoever their hearts tell them to love, and who have the right to choose freely to whom God they want to pray, are the minority, just 20%. The problem is not only in that fact that in authoritarian countries, the space for freedom is shrinking to the size of the prison cell. The problem is that even in developed democracies, people starting to call into question the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And there are reasons for this. The current generations inherited democracy from their parents. They have never fought for it. They began to take human rights for granted. They have become consumers of democracy. They perceive freedom as a possibility to make a choice between different cheeses in supermarket. But truth is that freedom is very fragile. We can't attain our human rights once and forever. we make our choice every day. And 5, people can change history. I have been working with the law for many years, and I know for sure when you can't rely on the legal instruments, you can still rely on people. We get used to thinking through the categories of states and interstate organizations, but ordinary people have a much greater impact than they can even imagine. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things. I would never wish anyone to go through the war experience, because probably war is the most horrible thing which just can happen in the human life. But these dramatic times provide us an opportunity to express the best in us, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to make a difficult but right choices, to take burden of responsibility, and to help each other. Because only when we help each other, only in that moment we are acutely aware what does it mean to be human. And I'm here to say that despite of everything, the story of Ukraine, it's a life-affirming story, because the dramatic times, they raise hope. Because when freedom is denied, it's become powerfully break out through every concrete individuals. And I'm here to say that in different countries worldwide, in the same second which we are here, many people are fighting for freedom and human dignity. Sometimes this fight may seem to be senseless because they are facing with enormous opposing power. However, the history of humankind convincingly proves that we shouldn't give up. Even when we have no tools, our own words and our own position always remain. Eventually, it's not so little. And let me finish and once again repeat the words of Desmond Tutu. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of oppressor. We are fighting for freedom, which have no limitation in national borders, as well as human solidarity. Our future is unclear, but not pre-written. It means that we still have a chance to fight for a peaceful, democratic future, which we want for ourselves and for our children. Thank you.